Hello everyone and welcome to another internally screening review, this time of Goodnight Mommy, the 2014 version. We're doing the original Austrian version, Ich as it's originally known as, directed by Veronika Franz and Severin Fiala. This film, I remember coming out at the time, got quite a lot of buzz. It's very, very European, extremely European, very much a I can't believe it's not A24 type vibe.
That's true.
Yeah, this film got quite a lot of buzz at the time. It's a bit different compared to your sort of standard horror film. I think at points almost borders closer to a thriller or sort of psychological drama at points.
Yeah.
With, some artistic license that you would expect from a more European horror film. So, what did you think of Goodnight Mommy?
I really enjoyed Goodnight Mommy. I think, like you say, it has that A24 atmosphere to it, which, kind of denotes a slower pace, a more subtle sense of horror. Like, there's no, big scares. There's no kind of, terrifying force. It is a very sort of tightly woven family drama with just three core characters, two brothers and their mother, and it's all about how their dynamics unravel over the course of the film, and they unravel big time. And I really like the pacing of it, the kind of different crests and troughs to, it's kind of all about the boys' paranoia about what's happened to their mother, because the mother comes back from having surgery, and for the first part of the film she has bandages on her face, and there's this implication that this is no longer their mother. And so you go through this arc and you resolve that element of it, like the bandages come off and you sort of learn more about her character. Your kind of levels of trust, I find, switch sides. Yep. Through the film, you kind of get very much thrust into the film in the view of the boys, and so you kind of take their side with it, and then there are actions that take place later on that really flip the focus completely the other way. And I just thought it had a really deft, subtle touch to it, that even though things get quite wild at points, things never feel like they've spiraled beyond the point of belief, or beyond the point of disbelief, rather. I was, very impressed with the writing. Yeah,
it was a very well-crafted film, I'd say. I think the cinematography is really good throughout. And you've also got two child performances, which in a horror film, isn't always going to go well. But in this instance, I think the two kids do a very good job. And I think, again, in a very European-ish way, it's not really going for naturalistic performances so much. It's more going for these sort of slightly affected, quieter performances.
Right.
And I thought that was a really good direction to take it, especially with this sort of cold and sort of austere atmosphere in the film that it kind of has, which again, you'd expect from European horror films. I just thought, the dynamics are really interesting. I'll be completely honest, my loyalties weren't flipping so much. I kind of very quickly grew to hate the children. Okay. Which, no spoilers, but I felt somewhat vindicated.
Yeah, that's good. No, that's completely fair. Yeah.
I don't know what that says about me, but that's what happened.
You saw children, you went, I hate them.
Yeah, well, not quite. Not quite. But I did grow to hate them.
Yes.
And, by the end of the film, I really hated them. But I think the film is just really well crafted. The direction's really good. It manages, I think, to strike a good balance of restraint and subtlety, while also not shying away from some extreme moments.
Oh, yeah.
Because there are some really intense moments of injury detail and gore that feel sort of intense and sort of, grind your teeth worthy, but never border on ridiculous.
Yes, I do particularly. There's one moment in particular I'm sure you're thinking of. Without going to spoilers, I just really liked, I think what you're saying about having this quietness and sort of taking your time with all these sort of pensive and atmospheric shots and just kind of letting things linger. Having something sort of cut through in that dramatic way naturalizes it as well, because it suddenly grounds that moment of violence in a very realistic
It's a bit of a turning point in the film, because until then you sort of mostly have subtle acts of more sort of, I don't know how you'd say it, not so much but kind of interpersonal sort of emotional violence with the characters kind of jabbing at each other, and that's a point where the film actually kind of flips and it finally you sort of get the moment where someone acts out, and it's kind of startling. It's
very startling, and I guess quite creatively hideous.
Yeah, it's definitely fucked up, but again, I don't think it's not oh god, this is turning into a different film. It still feels real enough. It
kind of in a way operates in the same sort of story space as one of those sort of horrible unsolved mysteries, or scary real true stories of these children went crazy and did this thing, and it becomes sort of an urban folklore, and it kind of had that element to it in places.
I sort of I feel like this I sort of get what you mean, but I don't think I really got that vibe. For me, it felt a bit more like a confusing moral tale. And I guess we can sort of push on to maybe some sort of slight complaints I have about the film.
Yeah, sure.
And that's that I do feel like narratively, this film had points where it kind of ran out of steam and had to do things that didn't really bring much in terms of the storyline. And in terms of how it concluded, I actually quite liked the ending.
Yes, very much.
But I wasn't a huge fan of sort of multiple parts where I feel like the film could tell there wasn't quite enough happening and had to introduce tension where there was none. There's one particular sort of elongated scene that I felt kind of bordered on the ridiculous with, I guess we have to get into some sort of, since we're moving on to storyline, some sort of some spoilers. So there's a scene where, so the two boys tie up the mother and effectively torture her.
Yeah.
So, to try and make her admit that, you are not actually our mother, because they, have this evidence that she's not, and they're sort of probing her with questions. And she seems to be genuinely sort of unable to answer some of them, or at least unwilling to answer them, which obviously drives up suspicion, because she should at least be able to answer some of these in terms of what's your favourite song and stuff like that.
Right.
And as they're effectively torturing their mother, these two incredibly invasive Red Cross supporters show up, and they're kind of like sat downstairs. And it's basically the only reason it happens, I think, is just because they needed some more tension in the film.
Okay, yeah, that's fair.
And I feel like maybe, I get why it has to happen in the film, for the film to be satisfying, to keep the tension up, because you sort of had that moment of intensity, and you need to sort of sustain it a bit. But I think the film kind of isn't sure whether it wants to be more of an abstract film with kind of more symbolic characters, or a more plot-driven film, and in that moment it goes something more plot-driven and realistic, and it doesn't feel quite connected.
In a way, there's also a kind of comedy to that scene, that situation, because it just does seem so ridiculous, and perhaps it's less cartoonish to a European audience, because I certainly
the Red Cross people will knock your door down.
Yeah, I've certainly never experienced that. Yeah, maybe an American example would be Jehovah's
Any
Witnesses.
Austrian viewers, if you happen to be here, let us know if you've ever been
if that's a commonality. But yeah, because I guess that it kind of felt ridiculous, and the way they were just kind of, there was no real plot reason for those characters to be there. It kind of felt like a little bit of a comedy sketch.
Yeah,
like
they just kind of show up and are vaguely suspicious and leave, and nothing else comes.
You could almost put a laugh track to that scene in the awkward silences of like, please let me out.
Well, I think it is effectively tense, but it just feels very forced.
I think, and tonally, I'm not sure it meshes. But I'm with you on that. In terms of my complaints with the film, the biggest one I've found, and I think we spoke about this while we were watching it, is there is an implication, and this is a huge spoiler, so please, if you haven't watched this film and you're interested in it in any way, go and watch it and then come back, or don't. That's up to you. Spoilers, 3, 2, 1. So the crux of the film is kind of, the reveal at the end is that the second brother, Lucas, is dead, and has been dead.
It's not really a reveal at the end.
Entire film. Now, okay, the film, this is my issue with it, and I think we kind of came out at two different sides of it, is that the reveal is overtly, explicitly made by the mum at the end of the film. Yeah. But it has been implicitly made the entire film.
But there is also one other point where she basically confirms it, when she takes the other kid into the room and is like shouting at him.
Right.
Because she's like, he's not here.
Yes. But it was something I found frustrating, because it didn't completely ruin the film or anything, but it felt like I couldn't quite understand what the film was trying to achieve in having it being like these sort of building blocks of, maybe this character isn't alive, and then getting more and more unfurling information so that we as the audience come to that conclusion naturally, and so by the end we completely understand why this character has this motivation, because he's in complete denial of his brother's death and the tragedy and the emotional damage that has done to him has turned him into a borderline psychopath. But then the mother overtly says this out loud to her son, and it just feels like we're given the same information again. As from an audience perspective, I understand that it needs to be communicated to the character as like a kind of last desperate moment of appealing to reason. But to me, it felt like, it felt clunky. It felt like a messy way of delivering that information that by rights we've probably already worked out by now.
See, the reason I didn't have a problem with it is, number one, I think I really liked that the film actually made it really obvious the whole time that kid didn't exist. and basically confirmed it very early on with that scene where she shouts at him. So if you sort of haven't been paying attention, it sort of becomes more obvious. And the reason I didn't mind that sort of final bit where she kind of says it out loud is that she does actually give you a new piece of information when she says that, in that she says it's not your fault that he was killed.
I see, right.
So I think narratively that didn't bother me at all. And I actually kind of liked the whole thing where it didn't really try and use this as a big twist. It never tried to be like, and M. Night Shyamalan, he's actually dead the whole time. I think it actually did it in a kind of subtle and interesting way that I've never seen it done that way before.
I don't know, because
I quite liked.
In my view, I felt like it did it felt awkward in that way, even though it was information that we had pretty much if you assemble those pieces. And I thought that the unveiling of it in that way did make it feel like a bit of a cliche twist, and that perhaps in sort of more recent horror writing or thriller writing, we've kind of become accustomed to films lulling you down one avenue. So it's like, all right, if I'm picking up the pieces that this is the sort of the true conclusion of the film, what is the film going to do to enhance that or do something special to kind of make that ending more satisfying than me just kind of assembling my understanding of it myself. And when it got to the end, I did feel a little disappointed that there wasn't more to it, that it was as plain and as sort of simple as I had imagined.
I mean, I can get that, because I don't think the film builds I think the actual conclusion of the film with the very sort of final few shots is maybe it's just the atmosphere of it, and you have the burning house. It's just very well shot. The actual sort of narrative conclusion just feels satisfying. I like that element of it, but I get what you mean. There isn't like a final hurrah, like, oh, there's this big thing that you but I guess it didn't really bother me.
Okay.
I actually just quite liked that they had this kind of interesting element, and I think I just don't see that final bit as I just disagree with your interpretation of that final scene as it being like an attempt to present a twist higher up, because there are so many scenes. Like, I also think of the scene where she's tied on the bed and she's looking at the two kids, and there's sort of like this bright light behind them, and then the other kid is sort of moving behind him, kind of goading him on to continue. Like, that just seems like that you have to have got it at that point.
Right.
You'd have to be, I don't know, just not watching the film to not get it at that point.
I do like the ending as a whole in terms of the drama of it, the cinematography, this really poignant moment at the very end where we've been alluding to the fact that you never sing the songs to us that we love, and then they're kind of like all reunited, we suppose, as kind of like ghosts or like
because it has that sort of strange intro where they're like in a weird 30s sing-along, which I didn't quite make heads or tails of. For me, the bigger complaint in terms of actual sort of character reveal stuff, there's this kind of spooky scene early on where the mother goes into the woods and she takes the bandages off, and she takes all of her clothes off actually, and she's walking in the woods. And she has this kind of weird sort of abstract moment where she's like screaming, but like her face is all like sort of done in a time lapse, but the rest of her body isn't. Like a typical effect. You've probably seen it before. And I thought, there's going to be something more to this, and maybe I missed it. The actual motivations of the mother are never really fully concluded, because there are moments. The film sort of revels in this ambiguity, which is something I really respect and something I enjoyed about the film throughout. But I don't think it could quite handle it the whole way, because the mother's actual intentions are basically unexplainable, because she does refuse to answer simple questions that she does know throughout the film. But the implication at the end is that it is their mother in some way. Despite the fact that there were points in the film where I was thinking, well, she must not be. The kids must be right. Why is she not telling them this? Yeah. The film never really settles that. And if it's not going to, fair enough, but then it feels odd to end it in a way as in, like, you don't have to answer the question, you don't have to tell me, but you have to at least make it work. And I don't think the film quite makes the ambiguity of the mother's actual identity make any sense, because she has to be the mother.
Because there are like conflicting sort of pieces of information given, like in that final bit where she's confessing, she knows something that's so intimate to the sons that she has to be the real mother. Yes, and yet earlier she's being so suspicious.
And so why is she... And so, like, you either have to basically give her a motivation for her to not do that.
To be as like distant as she is.
To be as distant and straight, because she does act very strange and abusive, right?
Yeah.
And there's many avenues you could go to. You know, maybe she's traumatized, maybe she's grieving or whatever.
Yeah. Maybe she's trying to placate her son, or like doing some
move
kind
him
of
away
some
from
kind of
his
like tough
fantasies,
love type thing. So she's like, all right, I'm not going to be this person I was. I'm going to be.
Yeah, exactly. So like, I think there's plenty of routes you could have taken, and I think the film basically opts to just not take any of them, which was disappointing because. And I feel like we've complained a lot in this review, but ultimately I would recommend this film.
Oh, 100%.
Because I think it does offer a really unique atmosphere. Well, maybe not unique, but it's quite an interesting topic. Mother-child relationships aren't anything new by any means.
No,
but
it's a slightly different perspective on it, like this kind of distrustful nature. Because I think a classic example of the kind of inverse of this would be Village of the Damned, the Midwich Cuckoos by John Wyndham. And the film's based on that, where, these mysterious children appear, and it's like this kind of the horror of the unknown of like, what is my child really? You aren't really, of me. This is like a spin on that way. And you don't often see that. I
mean, it almost sort of reminded me of The Lost Daughter with Olivia Colman, but it didn't quite have the same kind of bravery to it, because that took a really weird and difficult subject, and I think it wasn't like an amazing film. But it really confronted it in a way that made it really satisfying for me. Because it's like, it was such an uncomfortable, sort of almost unfathomable, but incredibly possible and likely thing to happen, right? Where someone just doesn't like their kids, which is a really interesting idea and not an easy thing to tackle, especially and make a character sympathetic while doing that. So this film is kind of trying to do something similar, I felt, but
it's kind of, it's a similar subject, but with a completely different atmosphere around it. Because Lost Daughter is very much going for a natural.
But I meant more thematically.
But thematically, for sure, and I think for me, my biggest takeaway from this film was its atmosphere. The performances are fantastic, as you mentioned earlier as well. That cannot be understated. From start to finish, it is gripping. It is a thrilling,
well-paced as well,
atmospheric kind of mystery film. But there are flaws within it that kind of prevent it from being as wonderful as it had potential to be.
What would you rate it?
I'd give it a solid 7 out of 10.
I would give it a 6 out of 10. I think it's definitely an above average film, but I can't quite justify the 7.
Okay. No, that's fair.
Yeah. I mean, I would recommend it just because I think it does offer something so different.
Yeah. I think I'd be intrigued to see what the American remake does with this, because I think it's always an interesting, even though so often is the case that American and Western, British, whatever remakes of these films tend to be worse.
It's just so soon.
It is very soon. And I wonder, regardless of the quality of those films, it's always interesting to see what it does with the atmospherics, because I think that's a very clean kind of example of the differences between different countries' interpretations of like horror and suspense and things like that.
Well, I haven't seen it, but I guarantee you they make the dead child thing a twist as opposed to what they do here.
Yes,
I would almost guarantee that. Yeah. So definitely check this out if you're interested in that. But in any case, we've been Eternally Screening. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to the channel. If you like the video, give it a like. If you dislike the video, give it a dislike, and we'll see you in the next one. Peace.